The May 12th, 2020 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education is called to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 3313.15 of the Ohio Revised Code. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Briner,
Here.
Mr. Buckley,
Here.
Ms. Jisling,
Present.
Mrs. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Tuttle.
Tom's muted. There we go.
Mr. Tuttle, are you present?
Present.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to welcome everyone to the May 12th, 2020 regular meeting of the Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education. Prior to this evening, each board member has received for their review and consideration the agenda and materials associated with each agenda item for the board's approval via the district's paperless Board of Education agenda system, Board Docs. The public can access the agenda through the school district's website. The agenda is available through the district's website for public viewing the Sunday prior to the board meeting. Board members have the opportunity to call the superintendent and chief financial officer for information concerning agenda items and to request, if needed, additional information. This meeting is being video conferenced live and can be accessed at youtube.com/user/Cardinal TV Mentor, Ohio. Tonight's meeting will not have public participation. The public can email the board members, superintendent, and chief financial officer with any comments and questions. Email addresses and a telephone number can be found on the website www.mentorschools.net. This meeting is being televised on a delayed basis and will be shown on Spectrum Channel 1026 in Mentor and Channel 1025 in Mentor on the Lake. This meeting is also being videotaped and will be shown on our YouTube channel, Cardinal TV Mentor, Ohio. Please place your mobile telephones on silent mode during the meeting. Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner,
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes. Next on the agenda is a need for the board to suspend policy 1.12, resolution to suspend public participation.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes. Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report and recommendations. Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. I have the following recommendations listed under the consent agenda and recommend approval of items 5A1 through 5A3.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner,
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle? Oh, Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of the resolution to accept and approve the Mentor High School graduating class of 2020 contingent upon their satisfactory completion of their requirements.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. President and members of the board, I have the following Board of Education policies on the agenda for a first reading. Because this is a first reading, no vote is necessary. Mr. President and members of the board, I have the following Board of Education policies on the agenda for a second reading and recommend approval of all policies.
Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle? Mr. Tuttle?
Yes. Are you not hearing me the first time? At all?
No.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. President and members of the board, I am recommending approval of agenda item C1 related to certified personnel and C2 through C5, all related to human resource matters. The resolution in C4 recognizes our spring sports coaches having participated in off-season conditioning programs, 2 to 3 weeks of early season practices, and those coaches have remained in contact with our student athletes. I am also recommending approval of agenda items D and E related to administrative personnel, including the addendum for the Director of Business Operations.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Briner?
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Thank you. This concludes my portion of tonight's agenda.
Board of Education report and recommendations. Section A, business recognition of Deanne M. Roberts, Mentor Public Schools Board of Education board member. Deanne and board members, I have an unofficial resolution to read. The Mentor Exempted Village Board of Education thanks and appreciates the public service rendered by Deanne Roberts. Her commitment to the students, staff of Mentor Public Schools, and community members is consistent and seamless. The board especially values her advocacy and support for the Career Tech program. Deanne searched and identified opportunities to praise the outcomes and elements of this program, and her support was unwavering. In addition, Deanne's support for the curricular programs, she is an active supporter of extracurricular activities, especially the Mentor Cardinals Fighting Marching Band, and the sports program, especially those sports that enhance opportunities for female athletes. The board enjoyed and valued Deanne's willingness to share her business and corporate experiences to help expand and reinforce the board's desire to continue responsible fiscal management. In total, the Mentor Board Exempted Board of Education acknowledges with gratitude Deanne Roberts' willingness to contribute and guide board policy and procedure. In short, thanks, Deanne. And now we have a video that we would like to share with you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Deanne, there's no crying at board meetings.
school. And over these past 8 years, you've pretty much taken me in to be like your second daughter, and I could not be more thankful for that and all the time and money you've spent and put into me and all of the adventures we've went on, and pretty much traveling halfway across the country together multiple times. And it's just been wonderful getting to spend so much time with you, and I cannot wait to spend more. Much love.
Mr. Roberts, I just want to say thank you and tell you that I appreciate you for everything that you do. Every activity that I have done through the high school, I have done with Emily, and you've always been there to support not only her, but the team and the other people in the activities. And I just want you to know that I love and appreciate you. And I miss you already, and I hope things go great for you. And thank you for being like a second mom to me.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts, for everything you did for Menor Rugby. Thank you for being the most welcoming and sweetest person there. You were always so encouraging and so supportive at every game, and I'm gonna miss it. I love and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts, for your love and support. I'll miss you. And thank you for always being the loudest at our rugby games. I wish you the best of luck.
Hi, Mom. Just saying hi. Thank you, and I love you. You have done a lot for me in my life, and I know that. You've done a lot for my friends as well, and we all know that. I wanted to say thank you for everything you have done, and I love you.
Hi, Mom. I just wanted to start this video by saying and expressing to you how proud I am of everything you've done and everything you've accomplished on the school board. And I just wanted to tell you that I am so beyond thankful for how you've changed not only mine and John's lives, but all of the students, all of my friends that you got to come close with. And I don't think you realize it, and I don't think you hear it enough, but you really do have an impact on so many students' lives and so many people's lives as well. And all of my friends, you're like a second mom to them. And I know that you are a very important person in their lives, as they are in yours. And you truly have made differences in so many people's lives. And I know that you will continue to do that, no matter where you are, no matter what board you're on or you're not on, and no matter what state you're living in. So I just wanted to tell you, thank you for everything. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and I love you.
Any other board members want to add anything?
Aw, that was
We're
really
going to
sweet.
miss you so much, Dan. Thank you for being such a wonderful part of the team. It was just like such a smooth transition when you joined us, and I've been grateful to get to know you, and the contribution of your point of view has been wonderful.
Sorry, Ken.
She brings me the coveted toilet paper.
Just short on that. One square. Well, Deanne, I've enjoyed our time together, and you have been a great asset on the board. Your business sense has been incredible. It's really been an asset to this board. I thank you for that. Your passion, your love for these kids, what you wouldn't do for these kids. And I know they appreciate that. That video was really, really special. Your friendship. So I hate to see you leave, but I understand. I want to thank you for the time that you spent and your dedication. And we do wish you well in your next adventure. Thank you.
Thank you.
What? You hear me? Almost right away with you, Deanne. You hit the ground running. You were like a team player immediately. Your contributions were immeasurable at the very board meeting. And of course, when we had our National School Board Association, you hit the ground and you were running. It's been a pleasure. I totally, you know that, just as everybody else will, but you've been very special. Great addition to the board. It's going to be tough to fill that fifth spot, what's your capacity to contribute? And you did that. I can't say you hit the ground running, and so you just awesome. I will miss you immensely, your contribution, and you as a person. Wonderful. There's one down there in Florida that, oh my gosh, of course, you're going to work for the same company, right? But just farther,
Mhm.
they're not, thank God, and you're not losing them.
No.
So best of luck, and you don't need luck. You make it.
Oh, goodness. I was not expecting that. I feel like I'm dropping the ball, but you know what I mean? I wanted to be like I said, a lifer with you guys. I enjoyed meeting you. I enjoyed working with you, but I enjoyed getting to know you, all of you. And it's been such a pleasure, and learning about the history of school funding and and all of that fun stuff. I have so much more to learn. Circumstances, you know, they change, and I know that you'll find somebody else, and no one will ever be me, because, well, you know, there's only one, and you know, you'll find someone that's going to fill my shoes and keep on going, and we will definitely keep in touch, because I will be coming up to Cleveland and, you know, visiting. And yes, I still work for the same company, Tom, and I'll have to go to meetings, and I'll let you all know, and we'll get together in an unofficial sense.
Yes.
Deanne, I'd like to also add that I don't think anyone fully appreciates the responsibility of a board member until they're sitting in the seat.
Mm.
And I admired the way that you transitioned into the responsibilities, represented the community, but always advocated for students and what was best, and never had a separate agenda. Always very respectful. And I think you're the model of a great board member. I very much appreciate the opportunity to work with you.
That was nice, Dan.
Deanne, it's been an honor to work with you, and how deeply you care for students came out through and through. The sentiments that we saw in the video tonight, I think, are just a small sampling of many other students as well. I want to thank you for your support of all of our ideas here in Mentor to make sure that we remain safe and innovative, nurturing, and obviously in good financial shape. You've been personally supportive of me through these couple of years, and tonight we want to honor you with something that's very hard to achieve, and that's our Crystal Cardinal, which is, as you've heard me say, it's hard to get.
The coveted cardinal. Wow.
It's hard to get, and we will deliver it safely to you. But what that stands for is once a cardinal, always a cardinal. And we'll be glad when you come back and visit us.
Thank you.
So thank
You guys, I have never felt anything but confident in the running of our schools, that we've got the best CFO and the best superintendent anywhere. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Truly. Enough. No crying. No more.
If there are no more comments for Deanne, we could move to the legislative report.
Oh, I have that. So there were a number of things on the listing. Congress has just come back into session, so they're busy at the State House. The one area that's probably the most interesting and impactful on us is the U.S. Department of Education submitting waiver recommendations to Congress. U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos responded to Congress regarding sections of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, known as CARES, that asked the department to recommend waivers that could provide limited flexibility to meet the needs of students and adults with disabilities during the COVID-19 public health crisis. In regard to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and Rehabilitation Act, IDEA, the Secretary did not recommend any additional waiver authority concerning the free appropriate public education, or FAPE, and least restrictive environment, LRE, requirements of IDEA. DeVos stated that we undertook this task acknowledging the reality that most students and teachers are at home today, yet America's teachers want to keep teaching and students need to keep learning. While the department has provided extensive flexibility to help schools transition, there is no reason for Congress to waive any provision designed to keep students learning. With ingenuity, innovation, and grit, I know this nation's educators and schools can continue to faithfully educate every one of its students. And I think her sentiments are noble, but naive. I don't think Mrs. Voss has any idea what the challenges are for the span of students with special needs and the unique challenges of trying to transition in a matter of days to plan for the education of that span of students with disabilities. I know every single teacher, from resource teachers to specialists and all kinds of additional support staff. It is a massive challenge, and I know Mr. Porter can speak to that specifically, but everyone I know did their very, very best, but it's not possible to replicate what a classroom can offer for special needs students who have all kinds of complicating factors.
If I may add, the face-to-face teaching, stopping in March and, pivoting very quickly to the online format, it's tough because, you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And I give our teachers and all of those who helped with the online education a ton of credit for what they've done to try to keep the learning going at home. In some homes, it worked pretty well. Other homes, for a variety of reasons, it's been tough sledding. But I will say, especially in the case of students with special needs, our teachers went above and beyond to the extent that they could. But many of the students benefit much more from having their teachers in person. And I do think through these last couple of months, there's a greater appreciation of teaching and what that face-to-face experience can bring. And we can't wait to get back to that. But it is tough to try to do everything, replicate everything the same exact way online when something is designed to be face-to-face. So I think under the circumstances, all those who had a hand in it did a commendable job.
Plus, Bill, the fact that we didn't have much time to prepare.
No.
And, I think the other thing that it really underscores is the relationship piece that the students and the teachers build together, and how important that is to make learning, even more smoother and enjoyable. I was telling Mr. Porter, my grandchildren at Menor High have both lamented the fact that they are not meeting with their teachers personally. And I was somewhat surprised by that, but I think it just underscores that importance of the relationship, and we've got to just keep that in the forefront.
And I think with online learning, using screens to approximate what a classroom setting would be, there are some things that work pretty well, but particularly children who have processing issues where looking at a screen for extended periods of time is very difficult. It's not an ideal delivery for that child at all. And so we didn't have any other options but to work within the framework that was available. So I can't say enough about my admiration for every professional and support staff member who tried to make this work the very best they could. There was so much additional time and planning to try to make it as effective as possible, that their efforts need to be applauded. But the recognition of the limitation of this as another modality rather than a regular classroom, I guess we didn't know what we thought we knew. Now we know for sure.
I mean, even the fact that I think our school day was expanded here, teachers taking time after the school day was technically over to Zoom with one student one-on-one, or Zoom with a few students, and have that time, in the evening at 7 o'clock, 7:30 at night, driving by and keeping that constant contact. So impressed with so many of them.
And for parents, there were a lot of parents who, despite their best efforts, had extenuating complications whether it was work or caring for other children or other variables, that despite their wishing to do what was needed to make it work optimally for a child in their care, it just wasn't possible. And so I fault no one. I think that the pandemic is the only one at fault, and that's nothing we can rail against. So we'll just do the best we can. But I'm so proud of our district for all the noble efforts made and the successes that were achieved. And those were many.
Mhm. I agree. Before we go to the Chief Financial Officer's report, I have a question, Mr. Porter. I did not check off on the agenda section E, Administrative Benefit Recommendations. Do we vote on that one? I thought you said A through D.
Yes,
We did.
I had intended to, yes. When we voted on D and E together along with C2 and C5, we had bunched a lot of them together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We did D and E and the addendum item all together.
Mhm.
Correct. All right, thank you. Now it is time for Chief Financial Officer's report and recommendation.
Yes, I recommend the Board of Education approve items 7A through 7D, and also item 7E, which is a supplemental appropriation. The supplemental appropriation is providing for the funding of the purchase of $1,013,952.40 of masks and sanitizer chemicals for next school year. And I think Mr. Porter has an update on this initiative and why we're doing it at this moment.
Right, we're doing it right now because we have an opportunity through the Ohio Schools Council Consortium to order large quantities of hand sanitizers and masks in preparation for the 2021 school year. This also allows us to get these items in time for the start of school. Looking at some draft language that could be coming out for what schools are expected to do next year. There will need to be, students will probably be expected to wear masks, although that's not finalized. Students will certainly, or hand sanitizer will certainly need to be in a lot of locations available to students throughout the day. And not just in, hallways, but, even in individual classrooms in large quantities. So in order to have this on hand, we had an opportunity to gain a discount in doing this. The price is still large, but, this, undoubtedly in these times, these supplies will be used quite heavily.
Mr. Porter, what model masks are they? Are they medical masks or cloth or paper, or, what kind of masks are we getting?
I do not have that in front of me. Right, I do not have that here.
Okay.
I'm not certain.
If I could add before the vote, I would like to just speak very quickly about the fiscal impact of this crisis on our finances. We are presenting the April financial statements that are beginning to reflect some of that impact. But on the bigger scheme of things, as was noted earlier, we have incurred a $1,976,128 reduction in state funding that has to be absorbed before June 30th. That's an increase from the original even distribution of the cuts across every school district. Which would have been 3.5%, or in our case, 552,000. The initial calculations were redone, factoring in a community wealth, recognizing districts like ours with a vibrant commercial tax base and an average household income above average. And our reduction to our state funding, instead of the statewide 3.5%, became 12.5%. We are receiving one-time money from the federal government that after the allocation to our non-public schools will provide $494,000, which we'll use to offset some of that reduction. We also expect that as a result of the shutdown of many businesses, including casinos, we'll see a reduction of $66,000 this year in our lottery and casino profit sharing. With the significant sudden decrease in investment rates, we're expecting about $150,000 reduction in anticipated investment income. The county auditor and treasurer have advised us that we could expect a 1 to 2% increase in delinquent tax collections. In this case, it's more of a delay and a cash flow thing than an absolute cut, but each 1% increase would cost us about $800,000 a year. The next collections will be received in the start of the new fiscal year, but nonetheless could be significant. Our spring pay to participate fees that we did not collect resulted in a shortfall of $50,000 of funding that we used to offset supplemental contracts. Also, our typical spring gate receipts from athletic events and playoffs is approximately $30,000, which again is applied against the cost of the spring sports. With the students not coming to school, we're anticipating a drop off of $380,000 in lunch and breakfast sales, which will result in the need for a subsidy to food service. It could be as much as $250,000. And also an expected additional subsidy of approximately $50,000 for our athletic department. On the expense side, we did have some favorable variances. Substitute costs we're estimating will be about $350,000 less than budgeted. Overtime about $70,000 less than budgeted. Bus fuel about $100,000 less than budgeted. Utilities with the lower utilization of our facilities about $150,000 less. That reflects the weather pattern and students not in school. And professional development and travel, $125,000 less than was budgeted. So there will be some reductions in this year's budget to help absorb that. But as when we look to next year, there are many speculating the almost $2 million reduction in state subsidy will reoccur next year. If we see a 2% increase in delinquencies, that's another $1.6 million on top of it. We do not anticipate additional federal funding. Continued reduction in investment income and lottery would be another $200,000 a year. Continuation of the extra subsidies in food service and athletic department would be another $300,000 a year. So we're going to have some very significant challenges. Fortunately, because of the board's very prudent, conservative fiscal management and the establishment of our general fund operating reserve, the impact of the increased expenses and the lower revenue will not immediately disrupt teaching and learning, but it will certainly, as we prepare next year's budget and the 5-year forecast, will have a significant impact on our financial future. I would note that just today, Bill and I were on a call with the Alliance for High Quality Education, a coalition of over 70 districts. They're a high performing, high wealth community like mentor. And there's an effort by Matt Dolan to introduce legislation that it's called a reduction offset payment that would provide additional one-time funding to offset that increased reduction for the perceived wealthy districts. If the initial simulation would provide us another $800,000 if Mr. Dolan is successful. To date, no hearings have been held, no clear indication of how successful that initiative may be. One final note that I'll make, and I think there was a reference earlier to charter schools, the governor's reductions year to date did not include any reduction at all for charter schools in the state of Ohio. Currently, charter schools are getting about $1.2 billion in annual funding, but were held harmless from budget cuts to this point in time. That's something else that our Alliance for High Quality Education is advocating, that that has to be revisited and more fairly addressed as far as sharing the state's financial challenges. So much more to come. We'll summarize this with our 5-year forecast update that we present later this month, but I wanted to give you that high level review.
Dan, could you please put that on a revenue and expense sheet and email that to us, please,
Absolutely.
with a net, so we can kind of get an idea. I think that would be helpful with what we're going to be looking at over the next couple of months to consider.
I
I would
have that out
appreciate that.
no later than this week's board update. We'll certainly.
That's fine.
have
And
that.
Bill, do you know if we're looking at any grants to try to offset any of this?
Not more than the usual grants that we would be filling out this time of year. My hope is there will be more offered.
That's what I was wondering. So as long as your Barb or whoever is in charge of that can be looking to see if there's any special grants under the circumstances that might help.
Yeah.
You know, this is such an unprecedented situation, and certainly the governor has done an extraordinary job of providing leadership for the health and safety of the state. And I'm sure he's looking at this catastrophe that has visited the state budget. And so he's making changes, but the trickle down has this miserable cascading effect, things that we never anticipated. But thank you, Dan, for the way you have organized the budget and planned and considered variables, not like this, but it has made our response more resilient than I think a lot of our other districts, even around us, struggling to not have it damage teaching and learning, that piece of it has been able to be maintained. So between Bill, your leadership, and Dan, your leadership, I think we've come out of this in a better situation than we ever might have if we hadn't had that kind of vision and anticipation of, you never know what could happen. So I'm really grateful for that.
Mr. Buckley, the masks are disposable, like this
Oh,
kind
okay.
that I've been wearing.
Same kind I have. Okay, thank you, Mr. Porter.
We need a motion and a second if we're ready to consider the recommendation.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mrs. Briner,
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
Thank you. That completes my report.
Next on the agenda is unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business?
There's a lot of unfinished business, but we don't have any answers for any of it.
Amen.
And Mr. Porter, Bill, you thought that perhaps toward the end of the month or the beginning of June, we might have some more direction from the state level that would help in planning going forward?
We do. The Ohio Department of Education is working with the State Department of Health and the governor's office to come up with some, they're calling them guardrails or parameters that schools will be expected to operate within next year. So, superintendents around the state are very anxious to see what those guardrails look like.
And when you met with the PTA presidents on Friday last, correct?
Right.
What kind of feedback were they sharing? I don't know if there was anything that was kind of like a clear trend, but did you get some feedback from them?
Yes, there's I think there's a feeling that the teachers and all all the personnel who have gone above and beyond for their children, and they're so grateful. And I think what we talked about earlier, they're recognizing the relationships that, the strength of the relationships between the teachers and their children, and how powerful that is. Also, I would say, while they appreciate all of that, I think all of them are anxious to have their children go back to school in the traditional way. And they know it's hard to have this much screen time, not to have that companionship with their friends and the relationships with the teachers. So they're ready to move back. We hope we can do so sooner than later.
Thanks.
Well, and I would hope that the guardrails are based on science and not politics. Because, foremost, and it's the safety of our students.
Absolutely. And also a big shout out of thanks to the PTAs who have been partnering to do their best to try to lift the spirits in ways large and small, with yard signs and other creative initiatives to try to bring a little joy back into a complicated situation. And I really, you see the evidence of their hard work everywhere, and I really appreciate it. And I know we all do.
Yes. Next on the agenda is new business. Is there any new business to come before the board? All right, if not, could I have a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
I'm going to note the purpose of the executive session is to discuss employee negotiations and the appointment of a public official.
Okay. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Tuttle?
Yes.
Ms. Jisling?
Yes.
Mrs. Briner?
She's muted.
Yes.
Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
All right, 7:42, we're entering executive session.
Can we take a break?
Click the join.
Yeah, we hit the join.
Hello.
Hello.
We're back.
There we are.
And we're live.
Are the babies in bed?
They are not in bed.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
That's
Okay, are we ready?
yes.
We are back from executive session. Before we move to adjournment, could I have a motion for interviewing candidates on April 19th and April May? I'm sorry. Thank you, Ginny.
So moved.
Second,
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Tuttle,
Yes.
Ms. Jisling,
yes.
Mrs. Briner,
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
And the purpose of those meetings will be to conduct an executive session to discuss the appointment of a public official.
Correct. Could I now have a motion for adjournment?
So
So
moved.
move. Second.
So the five will get together before the interviewee, right? I mean,
What?
we're picking up the session.
You want to have a session before we interview?
I think we should have a brief discussion.
Just a little organizational.
Like
Okay.
15 minutes and have the first candidate start at 5:30 then?
Yeah.
That
Okay,
makes sense.
that's
Sounds
fine. And again, we can decide who wants to ask what questions.
That sounds good.
That
Right.
sounds very good.
Get our setup. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
All right. We have a motion for adjournment.
Call the roll.
Ms. Jisling,
Yes.
Mrs. Briner,
Yes.
Mrs. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Tuttle,
We didn't hear you, Tom.
I said yes.
okay, Mr. Buckley.
Yes.
All right, we
All
are.
right. Meeting is adjourned.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yes.